I looked back at my time at Hamilton and I cobbled it all together. And I was like, I came on to that campus knowing nobody. And I studied abroad and I co-founded a sorority. I learned how to be a DJ. I wrote for the paper and I did all these things. And the school allowed me to stretch my arms into all these things. So it's like, yeah, move across the country, go to LA, try to be a TV writer. Sure, why not?
Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, an exploration of the Hamilton College experience. This week's guest is Céline Geiger, class of 2004. All right, another week. Here we go. One more step closer to putting 2020 behind us. Hopefully these conversations help a little bit in getting through this year. I continue to get some great feedback and hear from alums and members of the Hamilton community who enjoy reconnecting with the school and remembering their Hamilton experience and hearing the stories of others. And if you've been using the show as a way to reconnect with Hamilton, this week's sponsor wants to help you take it one step further. You know, they say food is love. So why not gift a little flavor of home? A throwback to happier times, a throwback to the Hamilton times. How about you share a pizza from Altieri's restaurant? That's right, Altieri's restaurant is shipping half-cooked frozen pizzas to anywhere in the United States. They've already shipped to 35 states, and they're ready to ship to you. So if you want a taste of Clinton, New York this holiday season, go to altierisrestaurant.com. That's ALTERIS, and order a pizza and have it shipped. How about listening to this show, reliving your Hamilton experience while eating pizza from Altieri's? And if you order that pizza online, shipped to you, it's going to come with a special holiday treat. And local listeners, you should know that Altieri's is open Wednesday to Friday for takeout from 4 to 8 p.m. And they're selling the Altieri's holiday stocking for $15, which includes a quart of sauce, 2 servings of dry pasta of your choice, hot chocolate, and a sweet treat. For those of you not in the Clinton area, sorry, those are only for local pickup. But if you're in the local area, go on and get yourself some takeout, pick up a holiday stocking. Again, altierisrestaurant.com. All right, we got a fun show for you today. Stick around at the end. We're going to feature new music from Drew MacArthur, class of 2019, otherwise known as Brew. And today we talk to television writer Céline Geiger. Céline is currently a writer and producer on the CW series Nancy Drew. She's worked on many television series, including Vampire Diaries, Valor, The Bold Type, and created the series Relationship Status. It was interesting to hear from Céline talk about her experience as a woman, as a new mother, working in show business, to hear how she got her start, and as what seems to be a common theme, the hustle and determination it took to get from job to job. I always enjoy these behind-the-scenes conversations and to see the human side of show business. And Céline is just clearly a good, smart person doing work she loves. And this one is, again, another masterclass for current students or recent graduates looking to start their careers, especially if you want to get into this line of work. You can learn a lot from Céline on how she got her start and how she goes about building her career. It's a good one. So have a listen and enjoy this one. Here's Céline Geiger, class of 2004.
I haven't been in New York in almost 2 years, and it's like the longest I've not gone home. It's so sad.
I mean, you've been in LA for a while. You like it?
I just celebrated 15 years.
Wow, that is a while.
Yeah. I hated it at first.
Did you?
It was really hard. It's just, I grew up in Yonkers.
Yeah.
I went to Hamilton, obviously. So it was like, I had a world that felt very familiar. And then you move to LA and literally nothing looks the same. Like I hated the trees, which is a strange thing to say, but those really skinny, iconic palm trees. I was
Sure.
like, these are not my trees.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I would just drive around like looking for anything that felt like home. It was really, really hard.
The
But
tree thing is interesting. I actually, we lived in LA for a couple of years. And when I was thinking about making the move, I met with somebody. It was like a job interview kind of. It was like a recruitment sort of visit, but it was here in New England. And it was someone from LA who was out on a business trip to Boston, and we got together, and he was like, everything's green, all these trees green. And I was like, really? That's a thing to you? And then, I, having lived out there, I'm like, oh, I get it.
yeah, so it's crazy. It's been 15 years. It's like you think back on the where you started and where you ended up. But I mean, that was the whole thing. I wanted to be a TV writer. So I just had a friend that wanted to come out here, and she was a year younger than me. She didn't go to Hamilton, but we were just friends from childhood. And she was like, if you wait a year, I'll go with you. And so I was like, okay, I'll wait a year. And so like I had a dumb job that I hated in the city, and I like lived at home, and I saved up all my pennies, and she graduated, and we just drove out here. So, you make a life for yourself out of literally nothing. And then you kind of look back and you're like, oh, that was pretty cool. I'm glad I did it. I think I also wanted to leave New York because I felt like if I was meant to be in New York, I wanted to know that I tried something different, and I didn't just fall back on the fact that I was from New York and I lived in the city. And like, I wanted to make sure that I was staying in New York for the right reasons, not just because it was like safe.
Do you foresee yourself ever going back?
It's hard. I have a daughter now, and it just feels like we have our friends and we have our lives, and I miss New York more in my 20s. I think, my friends are all going out, and I would go home, and you miss the energy and like the late nights and, all the access to everything that you have in New York. And you don't care that you're walking up five flights of stairs with your groceries, and you don't care that it's freezing, and you don't care about all these things. You don't.
The hard living part of it, it's easy to overlook in your 20s.
Yeah, and then when you're in your 30s, and you're just like, oh, I'm glad that I live in a place with no winter where I can just pull my car up to my driveway and drop off my Trader Joe's, and there's Trader Joe's on every corner. I don't have to wait in line, and you can't
find a parking space, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I have more space than anyone in New York has. So
right.
The trade-offs when you're an old person are
100%. Hey, when I lived there, anytime anyone from East Coast would ask me how it was living in LA, I said, well, it's Tuesday night in February, and I just put my trash can out on the curb, and I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. So I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
There's the you can't underestimate the value of outdoor living year round.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I think a lot of people, the perception of LA is that it's a sunny, fake place. And it is if you meet those people, but if there's plenty of genuine, great people here.
Yeah.
And I think a thing that I didn't realize about the East Coast until I had been here and went back was it's angry. People there are angry. And when I lived there, I was like, oh, that's the hustle. Get out of my way. No one's going to stand in my way. I'm going to do my thing. And when I go back and you just hear people screaming at each other on cell phones and just like getting into like fights and pushing each other for the subway and whatever. I mean, we're probably all just being angry in our cars out here, but at least you're not around it as much.
Totally. No. And I growing up there and living there for as long as I did, that's the way I was trained to expect everyone to be. And I'll never forget, there were like 3 or 4 instances early on when we moved out west where I was blown away by like the service industry in LA, how nice everything was. Like just anyone at behind a counter at a store. Like I remember we had to we were moving from a temporary apartment into our house, and we had to get a U-Haul to move some stuff. And I walk in on a weekend, the U-Haul place is packed. The people behind the counter are hustling. People are yelling at them, or like, things are going wrong. And I'm like, this is going to be the worst transaction I'm ever going to go. I'm just preparing myself to get into a fight with the person that worked there. And they were all like incredibly pleasant, the most pleasant people I ever talked to in my life. And they were like, any other place, any experience that like on the East Coast, that would have been battle scars, yelling, screaming, fighting, like not getting any service. And
Oh, yeah.
but constantly like that in LA, it was like everyone was just pleasant.
Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, they drink kale smoothies and they go on hikes. And I'm like, they're healthy.
Right. Right.
They're
right.
not just chain smoking cigarettes outside of bars. I don't know. I never say never. I'm like, my dream is to go back for work and be able to spend some time at home with see family but also be working. So it would be cool too, because my family's all on the East Coast and nobody knows what I do. And I mean, they know what I do, but they don't have access to it. I did digital show premiere at Tribeca in 2016, and like my whole family all came out. It was so nice because it was the first time that they actually got to interact with anything that I had done. So it would be nice to fuse those two worlds, I guess, one day.
I also felt like living in I mean, you get it in New York, but you really get it in LA because I don't get it here in Boston, is just the outdoor advertising, as you really get an understanding of what entertainment is coming and what is really out that you don't get in a lot of other places. So I feel like once we moved away from LA, I'm like, I don't know what shows are on.
I don't know what shows are on. We pass by billboards all the time. I'm like, what show is that? There's so many shows now. There's so many networks.
There are. Is that a good thing for you or a bad thing for you?
It's interesting. You would think that it was a good thing, but it's tough because it's a blessing and a curse. Like when I moved out here, I started in the business in January of 2006. And it was still ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox.
Yeah. And,
upfronts were in May. They picked up their shows. The writer's room started in June. Everything premiered in the fall. Like that was it. Like, I mean, obviously you had premium cable, you had some basic cable, but like AMC wasn't even a thing.
Right.
There was an assistant I worked with who was getting a job to be an assistant at AMC. His wife was pregnant, and he was like, I can't work at CA anymore. I got to make more money. I got to get out of the mailroom. We're like, AMC does like Westerns, dude. Like, what do you, that's a terrible place to go. And then they got Mad Men, and it was a whole thing. But
right.
Like none of that existed. And so it was tougher to get those jobs, but because there were less jobs, but they lasted longer and they were way more secure.
Mm-hmm.
And now, there's tons of shows everywhere, but the rooms could be 6 weeks, could be 8 weeks. You could be working on something that doesn't premiere until next year. And so you can't really use that as anything on your resume or like talk about it. There was a long time where you would get trapped in these contracts, like waiting for something to air, waiting for them to let you out. And our guild has done a lot to work to shorten those spans, but it's tougher. You've got to, whereas before you could work pretty consistently for 40 something weeks out of the year. Now, sometimes people have to take like 3 jobs just to get what they would have been able to make 15 years ago.
And I wonder if with the explosion of so many options and therefore so many places to fill content, does it lower the bar on the quality and therefore lower the need for these various platforms to promote these programs? To your point, there's so many shows out there. How many come and go and no one will ever know because they're just trying to fill spots, right? And so it's good if if you're a writer, it's a good opportunity to get something out there, but then does anybody actually see it? And does anyone actually put any investment in supporting the thing because there's just so much out there?
Yeah. I think too, if you have something, I think that it's a good market for niche. Mm-hmm. I work in YA often, and for a long time, nobody cared about YA. But I think with the proliferation of Netflix and streaming and young people going to those platforms, like YA is like a fun thing that people are actually interested in now. And I think sci-fi.
Well, I mean, you did a little vampire thing that people seem to care about.
Yeah. But I mean, that's why it's genre, but it's YA. But I think genre is doing really well. I think there's space for auteurs. Like Michaela Cole and I May Destroy You, and Dave Bird on Dave, and Donald Glover on Atlanta, very small shows that are just from a very singular point of view that have space now that I don't think would have space before when you only had 4 networks and you had to be super broad and hit everybody.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's good. I mean, it's everything. It's good and bad.
Well, I want to get into it more, but let's go back. How did you get from Yonkers to Clinton, New York?
So I went to a summer camp called the Center for Talented Youth, CTY, and they have sites at college campuses all over the country. And I went to Skidmore, but Hamilton was a site when I was at camp in the late 90s. Yeah, late 90s. So I knew Hamilton existed, and there was a camp brochure that would come out every year that would list like the courses you could take and the locations you could go to. And I always remembered the yellow, like the Martin's Way Bridge, and then the yellow like activity center. And it always stuck out to me. And I was like, oh, that place looks cool. And then when I was looking at colleges, I knew I wanted to be an English major, and I was thinking about maybe creative writing, and Hamilton had a creative writing major, so that was attractive. But I drove my parents up and down the East Coast. I saw like 30 schools. I was just all over the place. I wanted to make sure that I saw everything, and I had weighed all of my options, but Hamilton was the first place I saw. And even though it was the first place I saw, I still saw all the other things. But then I ended up getting in, and they gave me a really generous financial aid package. And so it was all kind of, it was the best school I got into, and they were generous. So it was great. But I went up to do the like accepted students night, and it was pouring rain. And I was staying at one of the dorms, like Babbitt or something, like way, way, way on the dark side. And the girl I was staying with had a study group that night in the library, and she was like, you could come with me. I don't know, it's raining. And I was like, no, I'll come. And we like walked across campus in the rain. And she was just like so nice. And there was just something so cozy and comforting I mean, whatever. Some people were like, oh yeah, when I did my overnight, I partied and it was a frat party and I like did all this stuff. I'm like, I walked across campus in the rain and sat in on a poetry study group in the library. And this is where I want to go. It just felt like home. It really did. It felt like home from the jump.
And did that feeling return when you came back as a student?
It did. I loved how small it was. I loved that we could see each other on campus, and you would walk to class and just be able to say hi to somebody.
I would always explain to friends who had gone to a bigger school, and I would say, remember in high school when you knew between second and third period, you'd see this person, and that's a point where you could talk to them for a few minutes. It's the same thing at Hamilton, where, I know on Wednesdays when I'm going from this class to that class, I generally see these 5 people because they're on the same schedule. And
yeah. And like I had friends that went to big universities, and one of them, I remember coming home for a fall break, and she was bragging about how her and her 2 roommates took the same class, and it met 3 times a week, and each of them went once. And they all just took notes for each other because they were in a huge lecture hall with 500 undergraduates. And it was great because you got to sleep in. And I was like, that doesn't sound great. I'm in a class with 20 people, and if I wasn't there, the professor would definitely know. And I'm learning. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I'm a nerd, but like I thought there was so much opportunity at Hamilton to really dig into learning, which I think you can only get at a small school.
And you mentioned you were interested in creative writing coming in. Was this career path that you put yourself on something you knew you wanted to do even back then?
Yes. I always wrote. Writing was my favorite thing to do. But I didn't know that you could be like a screenwriter. I knew fiction. I had taken like fiction workshops and writing workshops in high school and stuff like that. So I knew that was hard and competitive, obviously. Like, not everyone gets to write a novel. So I was really interested in publishing. And I thought that editing and being in the editorial side of things would be really interesting. And I tried hard to get good internships in the city all my summers, and I never got anything that had a promising career path for after we graduated. So I was kind of at sea a little bit. And then my senior spring for my English major, and it was called The Hollywood Novel. It was Professor Doran Larson, and it was about adaptations from book to film. And so we studied books, we watched films, and we studied Hollywood and kind of like 1940s old-timey Hollywood stuff. and our final was to do a short film and write it, shoot it, produce it, cast it, everything.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I had never seen anything like that on any of the English, syllabus and like anything. I mean, this was Hamilton didn't even have like a digital media minor or anything.
Right,
So there was
right.
nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is so cool. And so
And this would be early 2000s, mid two. Like, what are we talking?
This was spring of 2004. So it was like
2004. So what do
right
you shoot?
before.
What are you shooting on at that point?
Well, Hamilton had an AV club, and it
Oh,
was
right.
I was like, what are you shooting on? I don't know. And so we all got paired up in groups, and our professor tried to pair us up with people who had complementary skill sets. So I was like, oh, I'm a writer, and I got paired with these two guys who were filming things and were like on their own just for fun, with AV equipment and stuff. And so, which was kind of nuts because it was pre-YouTube, and like people are just like shooting short films around campus. What? But so they were awesome. And we got our friends who were theater majors to be in it. And I wrote the little script. We adapted Cathedral by Raymond Carver. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Cathedral by Raymond Carver. It's about a blind guy. And it was great. It was so much fun. We did the whole thing. We shot it at somebody's house downtown, and I had such a amazing experience putting the whole thing together that we screened everything for our class, and we had like, a debrief afterwards with the professor, and he gave us an A, and he said that we had done a good job. And I was like, I'm graduating and I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And this was like a really exciting experience that I just did. How do we turn this into something? And he was like, go to LA. And I had never been to California before. And I was like, that's insane. I can't just go to LA. Like, can't I just do this in New York? Like, I'm from the city. And he's like, you could, but if you really want to be serious, like, take a shot. Why not?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I was at. And so I had this friend who was like, I'll go with you. And so I was like, okay.
So you did that. You did that project, and you said, I want to do more of this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. And it helped too. I got a job in New York that I didn't care about. I think if I had found something that I loved, maybe I would have been like, oh, well, I've got this thing.
And what was that job?
I was a writer of corporate biographies for this company that did, they did law school guides, and they did medical school, like all like advanced school guides. And then they did these little like fact sheets about big Fortune 500 companies. So it would be like, if you're going to interview at John Deere, here's like the top 5 quirky facts that you should know. And here's a little blurb about the company. And I wrote so many of those. I had so much useless knowledge in my brain for that whole year. But it was cool. It was in Chelsea. It was this like big office space, and the whole editorial team just sat and didn't speak and wrote and edited. So it was lonely.
But while that wasn't writing, I'm sure you wanted to be doing, did it hone some sort of skill? Was there any kind?
No. Deadlines, turning in things on deadlines.
How to make something boring seem somewhat interesting, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. How to not do this anymore.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, we were in a warehouse in Chelsea, and I just listened to my iPod all day, and I wore jeans, and it was very, low stakes, but I was ready to leave after a year. So yeah, my friend and I came out here, and I had hit up, all the Hamilton people that I could, but it was hard because there weren't that many people out here, and people are so busy, and it's a really specific kind of thing you're doing. So like I met people that worked in commercial production and business affairs, and they're trying to be as helpful as they can. They're super friendly. But they can't get me any jobs in TV. So
so you're in the car, you load up the car, and you're driving west. What's the conversation in the car? What's the dream? We're going to get out there, and you have an idea for a script ready to go, or are you just going to try and get in, or what was the initial plan?
I wish I remembered. I had written scripts. So my friend I moved out with, she had lived in LA briefly for a semester, and she interned with an entertainment lawyer, who very kindly got on the phone with me, and she read a script of mine, and she said, I think this has promise, but, I think you should come out here and hone your skills. So, I mean, I had done a lot of research. Like John August is a pretty prolific writer, and he had a website that he would just publish so many old scripts of his. And I would just devour them. Anything I could read about screenplay writing, because I didn't take any screenwriting classes. I had no idea what I was doing.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just kind of like, we're 23, let's try this. And if it doesn't work out, we can always go home. So it was weird because you're just in this new place. And, when I said LA was hard, it was hard for a lot of reasons, not being familiar, but also just being not having a plan, which that was never who I was. I always had a plan. I always knew what I was going to do. And I always knew everybody around me. And so I was totally I was at sea. And I just was meeting anybody I could meet, just getting coffee, just any advice they could give me. And somebody I met told me that I should go work at an agency, because that's where they're like, it's like going to grad school for entertainment jobs. You get to meet everybody. You get to like learn how the business works. You get to just have access to so many things. And so I was like, okay, great. How do I do that? And they said that there were some temp agencies around the city that fed specifically to like the big four at the time, CAA, WME, or CAA Endeavor, UTA, and ICM. So I got my resume into one of those spots, and it was a string of really lucky coincidences. This temp agency called me in because I had a publishing background. So I'd had all these random publishing internships and this publishing experience writing in New York. There was a opening at CAA in the books department for an assistant to do, books to film and stuff. And so they were like, your resume seems like that might be a good fit for you. So I went in to CAA to do that, because anything to get me in the door. And I sat down with HR, and they told me that job was filled, but there was an assistant job opening in the TV lit department. I'm like, oh, what's that? And it's like, working with TV writers. I was like, well, that's exactly what I moved out to LA to do. So that's pretty crazy.
Wow.
So I sat down with this guy that would eventually be my boss. And of course I Googled him. And there was some article I read somewhere where he and some old friends of his that had been in the mailroom would always meet up to do breakfasts like once a month and just follow each other's careers and stay in touch. And so I mentioned that when I was in the meeting with him, and he just like stared at me. He was like, you Googled me. You Googled me. And I was like, all right, this is make or break right now. This guy either likes me or hates me. I was like, of course I Googled you. Like, I'm going on an interview. How could I not? And he was like, okay. But he hired me, which was great. And he loved to hire people that didn't want to be agents, which to his credit, a lot of people wouldn't do that. Because you want to groom somebody. You want to know that if you're going to give them a year of their life, they're going to learn from it in some way. And so he always picked people that wanted to be creative people, just to help us get a foot in the door. Like the girl that I replaced ended up, she was a documentary filmmaker. And then the guy who came in after me was also a writer. So I was really lucky in that regard. I worked at CA for a year, and it was boot camp. I mean, what'd
you learn?
Everything. Literally the names of every studio executive, every network executive, the process of television, which again, back then was very regimented. Like the spring was when the pilots got shot. June was when they started up, and when you sold the next crop of pilots for the next year. Just that kind of cycle of when things were selling, what was selling, following the trends, reading. I mean, the library was massive. So I would just print out scripts every weekend, like the Friends pilot, the OC pilot, the Felicity pilot, like all of the shows the Lost pilot, anything I could get my hands on, and just read and just break them down and just study them. And meeting people, the other thing that my boss was really great at was instilling in me that the town just runs on people. And I think that that's something that Hamilton is great, lays a great groundwork for, because Hamilton is so built on relationships and connections and knowing people and seeing people. And so I kind of had that in my DNA. And so I was like, I know how to, be social and go around and say hi to people and do that. So I mean, my boss was like, when you're broke, just go out every night, just buy a Diet Pepsi with anybody that will sit down with you. And so I just went out so much, and I met so many people, because also when you work at CAA, people are like, oh, that's a big company. I'd like to like learn more about that, or talk to me about that. So I had a pledge class of all the assistants that were like my year there. And, you know, they're running production companies now. They're network executives now. Like everyone who stayed in LA is doing really well, and that they're my people. And so, you know, you have a really great foundation of just the people that you start with. And you only get that by working at one of those big companies like that. So,
wow.
I have a lot of love for my year at CAA.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, you know, it's interesting because the idealized version of making the trip out west, I'm going to be a writer and I'm just going to hammer away at scripts and try and sell my script, but actually getting a quote unquote real job and learning the ropes and learning the business, because it is a business. So it's a good learning experience.
Yeah. And, you know, these jobs are they're not forever. And so when your show is over and you're working on a show and you need another job, you need people, you need a network, you need people looking out for you. And so that was really great to have that. Because after CAA, I worked for Amy Sherman Palladino. Again, she was a client, not of my boss specifically, but of the agency. And I was friends with her agent's assistant. And I was ready to leave. And the assistant's like, you know, Amy's looking for somebody. And so you can't get those kinds of connections unless you're in the mix. And so I went and worked for Amy. She had a pilot at Fox. And so I worked for her for a year, and she was fantastic. She knew it was my first production job. And so I was in the edit bay with her. I was on the stages with her. I was in casting with her. Like, I was just her shadow, which was really, really awesome. But then the pilot was over. And so, you know, you're out of work again. And so I'm calling up all my friends and like, hey, you know, what does everybody got? Anybody, you know, and that's how it was for a while. I ended up then working for the head of TV at what was Ashton Kutcher's production company. So then I did that for 2 years. So that was interesting then too, because it was development. It was working for producers, which I hadn't done before. So I was really lucky and a little bit strategic in learning the business, and then learning production, and then learning development, and kind of making sure that I had a foothold in all of the assets or the aspects of the business, just so I would be more aware and just have a better base of knowledge. So yeah, I was at the production company for 2 years, and then I wanted to. At a certain point, you're reading other people's scripts and you're helping produce other people's shows, and you're like, all right, I'm kidding myself if I think that I'll be happy doing this for the rest of my life. I moved out here to write. I had some financial insecurity, and so it was nice to have a desk job.
Sure.
But then I was like, I got to get back into it. So
were you writing throughout all that, through all these jobs? You were
all specs, so many specs, nothing landing, but you know, just to get experience doing it. Sure. And then there was a client of my boss's at CAA who had an idea for a show who I'd kept in touch with. And that was the other great thing about CAA was like my boss he had repped a lot of young writers. And so they were so great, and they would sit down, read my silly, bad scripts and give me notes and, you know, give me advice and stuff. And so one of those guys had an idea for a show I thought my boss would really love. And so I brought him in to meet her, and then they ended up selling the show to series on CW. It was called The Beautiful Life. It lasted 2 episodes, but that was my jump back into production because I was like, I really want to get back into production, you know, and they were like, we'll try to figure out something for you. And I met with the showrunner, and there was a job to be a script coordinator. And I had no idea what that meant, but I was like, I will be the best script coordinator you will ever know. And so he hired me. And so I learned how to be a script coordinator.
And what is that?
It's basically, there's 2 big assistant jobs. If you're on a TV show, there's writer's assistant and script coordinator. So the writer's assistant's in the room every day, taking all the notes, taking notes on calls, just organizing everyone's thoughts. And then script coordinator is very technical. It's literally getting the script ready to go to shoot. So, you know, making sure the acts are numbered correctly, making sure the cast list is correct, making sure the production or the set list, all the locations are correct. And if there's changes from draft to draft, making sure they're marked correctly so that everybody can see. So you get to really understand how, not only how a script is made, but then also how it goes out into the world. Because, there's a version where you just sit in a room all day and you write and you write and you write, and you don't think about how the first AD is going to be needing you to give them this, or that, if you have a location and it's the same location in one slug line, you call it house, and one slug line, you call it home. That could be confusing to somebody. So I learned a lot just about how to get a really tight script from that job. But I did that for Beautiful Life ended. And then I was lucky on Beautiful Life. I befriended one of the producers by basically making her mixtapes. Her office was next to mine. And when I was working, I would just be listening to music when I was like putting scripts together. And she popped into my office one day and she's like, "Oh, what song is that? It's cool." She's like, "Yeah, I used to listen to music back in the day, but I don't really pay attention anymore." And I like messaged one of the other assistants. I was like, would be so weird if I made her a mix. Because I would make mixes. I always made mixes for my friends. So I did that, and then I just kind of became friendly with her. And then
it's a big step in the relationship, making a mix for somebody.
Oh yeah. That's how my husband and I like first started like hanging out with making mixes. But yeah, so then the show got canceled, but she got a show and she brought me over, and so show to show to show. But again, it's so much of the business is, and you can't teach it to somebody until you're in it. But it really is like you have to have talent on the page, but a good part of it is just being somebody that other people want to be around for 8 to 10 hours a day in a room, and just being somebody that people are interested in, and somebody who's friendly and somebody who has a good attitude, because a lot of that really goes a long way. And so that was something I picked up early on, was kind of the happy social aspect of being in television. And
when you talk about going from show to show to show, is there a lot of each new project is this one's going to be big and and disappointment has it, or is there still a lot of like, this isn't going anywhere, but it's a job and we'll get through it?
You can't get excited, because if you get excited, then then you'll just be disappointed. So
right. I had a conversation with Dave Liari, and he said it's a lot of just bad. It's just an industry full of just bad news, constant bad news for people.
Yeah. You want to, and you never know. You really never know. I mean, I've seen shows that there's been a number of shows in the past couple of months that had season pickups that had scripts written that just got canceled. Mm-hmm. And there's so many reasons why things don't go anymore, but you got to stay frosty. You can't just think that you're on the show that's going to go 8 seasons. You can secretly hope, but
sure, of course.
So I was on The Beautiful Life, and then Anna took me over to Being Human on Sci-Fi, and she gave me a script there. I worked for her and her husband, and they were co-showrunners, and they gave me a script, and then I was able to parlay that into a staff job with the help of an agent who I had met through friends, and he was an assistant and I was an assistant, and he was like, one day I'm going to be an agent, one day you're going to be a showrunner, so let's hit the ground running. So I had him looking out for me, which was great. And then I got staffed, and I thought that was my big break. I was
when you say staff, that means you're a writer in the writer
on the show. No longer an assistant. I was like 6 years, assistant jobs are over, and then that show gets canceled, and then you're out of luck again. So the thing that was nice about working at the agency in the beginning of my career was seeing people who were on shows that get canceled, who figured something else out, who sold a show or were down on their luck and their luck picked up. And it's such a roller coaster. And I learned early on that it was a roller coaster, and you have to be along for the ride.
Right.
So I just rode the ups and downs for years. When
I lived in LA, that was a thing that really stood out for me. Is you had mentioned earlier this perception that it's fake and, all the East Coast bias against LA. And I like you, I didn't really experience that. I'm sure there's pockets of it, but what I experienced and my exposure, I mean, I didn't work in show business, but my exposure to it was working Hollywood, right? Lived in Culver. It's a lot of working Hollywood. Mar Vista was a lot of that. In both cases I had neighbors. In my first place I lived, our upstairs neighbor he had been a writer on Friends and I think had done very well for himself for obvious reasons. But then the writer's strike hit and work dried up. And, he was hustling from job to job and constantly hoping that the next big one was going to get picked up. And you don't think about that when you think most people that aren't in it don't really realize the hustle and the grind and the constant, turn and, the turnover of these jobs for people.
Yeah. And when I was younger, it was scary, but it was exciting because I never worked a job for longer than a year. And so for years, for like 10 years, I never had a job that lasted longer than a year. And so I was constantly out. I was going to meet people. If you felt like you were in a job that wasn't great and then it was over, you're like, all right, that wasn't so bad. I'll get the next one. But then when you're on a job that's really great, you're like, oh man, I loved working with these people. And I'm really bummed I'm not going to see them again. So it's exciting, but now that I am, have a child and I'm in my late 30s and would like to buy a house, it's a little less exciting.
Sure.
I'd like a little more stability, but I'm still got the hustle. You can't let it go.
Well, you still have the fire.
Yeah. I'm working, trying to work on something on the side for myself when Nancy Drew's on hiatus. So, you just always got to be looking ahead. Always.
So talk to me about relationship status. I'm intrigued by this one.
Yeah. So I wrote relationship status as a bunch of shorts that I wanted to shoot when I started working on it in 2008. And it was around the time I was seeing a lot of digital places pop up, like Lonely Girl 15 and Sam Had 7 Friends, and CBS had a digital wing. And this was like 2008 digital. So this was not what it is now. But a lot of people were trying to invest in, Funny or Die and all these like short form things. And so I had interest from a couple places and I developed it a couple times and, got paid for it. And then whenever it was ready to go somewhere, like the next step, I always got the call that they weren't going to greenlight it. And so I was kind of bummed about it, but I knew that it was interesting and I knew that I had something that I believed in. And so, and I should say that it's just a bunch of shorts about people in their 20s who live in New York and LA and the way that their social networks cross paths and overlap. And it's interesting because one of the big notes I kept getting from people was that because I changed characters every episode, it would be really confusing for an audience. And an audience only wants to see, they want to go on a journey with somebody over multiple episodes, and they don't want to keep changing. Can you hear my baby?
I can, but it just humanizes you. Okay. And we're all on Zooms all day for work anyway, and kids are in and out. I have 2 kids. Yeah. I hear it, but I don't hear it because I have 2 of my own. So
people kept telling me that it should be about one person, and I was like, that's not the point. Because the whole thing that I was wanting to kind of capture, that I was fascinated by when I moved to LA, I didn't know anybody, but the more people I met, the more people I met in LA that knew people that I knew from like the East Coast. And it got to a point where there was a guy that I went on a date with whose college roommate in Boston was the brother of this girl that was living in DC with a friend of mine from Hamilton. And I was like, you can't make that up, And so I wanted to make it a big sprawling thing about a lot of different people with a lot of different tones and a lot of different stories. That was, confusing for a lot of people until I finally found producers that believed in it. And then even then, it took us another 3 years to sell it, because with them, there was more interest and they got it in front of more people. And we wanted to make it at a price point that in digital maybe was a little bit high. and people wouldn't give us the money for it. And so, I was disappointed, and my producer was like, you'll be happier if you wait for the right partner than if you just take one of these deals that we all know is not going to be great. He's like, let's just wait. And I'd been waiting for, years at that point anyway. So,
and through that process, was there always a commitment to it being short form
yes,
episodes? You weren't interested in stretching it out and making it a little bit? No.
I really love the way that you can play with scene work in short film, and just short form is just you're in, you're out. You don't have to do a lot of, setup. You can be really specific with who these people are, and you can just dig into details, and you can just sit in a conversation and learn about people. And so for me, that exercise it was a different exercise than television, because television, Act 1, here's your 5 main characters. What's their launch of their episode? What's everybody doing? So this is what this person's doing. This is what this person's doing. And here's what they were doing the last episode. And here's what you've got to set up for the next episode. And there's a lot of math involved, and it's great. And it's really exciting to be on a show that, you can tell long form stories, but specifically for this, I just wanted to do very slice of life, kind of grounded stuff. So we ended up, my producers had a relationship with Milo Ventimiglia, and then his company came on board, and he agreed to EP and star, and he was a fantastic partner.
That had to help.
He was so great. He would call, and this was when he was shooting the This Is Us pilot, so he was so busy. He would call agents and managers that he didn't know, and he would just introduce himself over the phone and say, "Hi, I'm Milo. I'm EPing this show, Relationship Status. We're interested in your client for a role. I'm here if you have any questions." And it's just, I've been really, really blessed in my career to work with really, really good, supportive people. Like, I think there was a fear I had definitely moving to LA and reading like assistant blogs about people throwing staplers at your head and just getting screamed at the whole time. And I don't know, by luck or just by an ability to pick people that are good people, I've been really, really blessed to work for great people.
That's great.
So we did it. We shot Relationship Status in 3 weeks at the end of 2015, like right before the Christmas holiday. And like crazy, we had like 3 weeks to prep. Like it all came together so fast. Like when something comes, it comes together. I had been waiting 7 years to shoot the thing, and then they're like, "All right, you're going to shoot it in 3 weeks." You're like, "What?" Okay. But we just had a really, really great group of people, and the actors who were all just in it because they liked the material and they knew that they weren't getting, a big paycheck. They just wanted to make something fun. And so it just had it had the spirit of generosity. That was really, really lovely. And then it premiered at Tribeca, and then we got 2 more seasons. So all in all, I did 3 seasons, and then Go 90 went bankrupt and disappeared. And now the Relationship Status like episodes are nowhere to be found on the internet. It's just been like scrubbed. So.
I know. I looked, I tried. Some good snippets and like a good trailer.
Yeah, I've tried to find them. My producers, because also the production company that made them also went bankrupt, so they don't even exist anymore. So,
well, I'll tell you. I mean, the bits that I did see. I mean, it looks like a TV show. It was shot really well. I mean, it looks great.
I was really proud of it, and it helped me too, because previously, the only time I had been on set was just for an episode it was my first episode of TV ever. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no confidence, and I had a horrible, horrible time. And I was afraid to go to set, and I was afraid of production after that. And so to be able to grow that skill set with a project that was mine, where if I could ask questions and I could feel supported, and I was around people that wanted me to understand and learn. That was great. And then I understood production, and I felt much, much more confident. And then I spent the next like 3 years just traveling, covering set for different jobs, and just feeling really good in a way that I hadn't before.
Were there a lot of moments when that was getting shot where you had spent years and years developing this and writing it, and it was so much of you's in it, and then you're like, but that's not what I was thinking. Like when you see it actually start. No.
Well,
that's good.
There was one scene in one episode where the actors had a different idea of how to play it than I did. And we were so run and gun. We hadn't had rehearsals. We didn't really have time to tone and to talk about the scenes beforehand. We were just shooting. And so that was, I think, the only scene really. Seasons 2 and 3 were a little tough because we were shooting in Salt Lake City for tax credits. And I was on a show called Valor, which was in LA. And so we were shooting we did a couple weekends in Salt Lake. We were doing a couple 6-day weeks. And so I would commute for a month. Right before Valor started, we were prepping in Salt Lake. So I spent a week in Salt Lake prepping and then came back to LA for Valor. And then every weekend I would fly. I would commute from LA to Salt Lake to be there and be on the ground and catch a Saturday. And so I wasn't there for most of that shoot. And so some things looked a little bit differently than I would have imagined. But I wasn't there. I couldn't be there because I had another job. And so that was actually really great too. Cause I'm watching dailies for my second episode of Nancy Drew, which is shooting now in the middle of, a pandemic and nobody can be on set. And so it really trains you to know that once you've written the script and you have the idea, but you're one part of the machine, there's a director who has an idea. There's an actor who has an idea. There's costumes, there's locations, there's all of these people doing their jobs. And if they're doing something differently than what you thought it was, there's no malice. They just had a different idea. And so,
right.
Especially in television, it's such a collaboration between all of these different people. You kind of have to like divorce yourself from, I mean, unless you're Sorkin or something. I think you have to divorce yourself from what it is and embrace the fact that all of these people are bringing their expertise and their energy and their ideas and their heart and making something that feels more like it was a collective effort.
And I imagine, unless you're a Sorkin, if you make a stink about certain things, then that next job's not going to come along too quickly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's been some times on set where I'll be, an actor doesn't want to say a thing, and I don't know. Sometimes you can have a conversation with them, and sometimes you can understand why they don't want to say it, and it makes total sense, and you can find a meeting ground. And then, sometimes somebody's just in a bad mood, and you're just like, I don't care. You say the thing. Yeah. If they just don't want to say it. And so you're like, you're getting paid to be here to say the words, I will totally listen to you if you want to have a conversation and tell me why you don't think that's something you would say. But if you're just going to have an attitude about it and huff around, then I'm not that interested.
Did you ever have the urge to go in front of the camera? No.
Oh, no. Directing maybe one day. I have no interest in being an actor, especially now having worked with so many. You have to be so vulnerable in front of hundreds of strangers. Yeah. Over and over and over again. Right. It's a lot.
And then be told on the spot, no, do it better this time, or do it differently this time. Or,
yeah. And I've gotten better giving notes working with actors, because in the beginning, my note would be, I think it should be more sad, or, I was imagining like your tone would be a little bit happier, and that's so subjective. And you really learn the actor isn't playing an emotion. They're playing an action. They're playing something deeper than just happy or sad. And so you have to do your work to give them, okay, in the previous scene, you found out that your dog died. And so that's what you're carrying in this scene, or I think in this scene, you're feeling weighed down by the world, or just something more specific than happy or sad. And to be able to be an actor, to take those, to not only remember all the lines that you have to say, but then to take that note and internalize it on the spot and make a change, and then just be like, was that okay? Is that, is that better? Like, that's a lot.
It's like sorcery, it's like otherworldly. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you see somebody do it well, it's magic. Yeah. When you give a note and they just understand it, or sometimes when you just get a cold read and you just are watching like an audition tape, and in the scene that you've written like the terms that you want to get, like this is the joke. And if they hit the joke, all right, great, we're moving on. And if they hit this, okay. And then sometimes you get to the end, like they hit everything without any direction. You're just like, wow, that's so cool. It's really cool.
So you liking your current gig with Nancy Drew?
Love Nancy Drew.
All right.
I really do love Nancy Drew. It's a really supportive group of people. I feel like I keep saying supportive. I've just
that's good.
It's just it's a really good room full of people. And my boss had her son is 8 months older than my daughter, and so it was really, really stressful. I was meeting people last season for staffing when I was pregnant, and I made sure to show that I was pregnant because I had gotten a lot of advice from people that were like, hide it as long as you can because you don't you don't. And I was like, it's 2019. I don't want to hide it.
Right.
I think that's horrible. And so it was tough because you're wondering how you're going to be judged. You're wondering what the room environment's going to be once you get the job. You're wondering how you're going to be as a mom. I had so many emotions. I was a mess. And I met on Nancy, and Noga had her son and she was breastfeeding him in the room. And she was like, you are with your people. She was like, this is your place. And so, we had a nursery on set. They turned an office in our suite of offices into a nursery. And so she had her nanny with her son every day. And when we were going into the office, I brought my nanny and my daughter in every day. And if I needed to go feed her, go feed her. If I needed to, there was like a moment where she needed to be fed, and we were working on my episode, and it's hard to leave the room when it's your episode because you got to be there to talk about people. And I was like, can I feed her in the room? And, room full of people, they're like, go for it. I'm like, breastfeeding my baby in the corner of a writer's room while all of these people are, at the whiteboard writing for me and helping me write down all of my ideas. And I was like, I could not have dreamed of, I didn't know that it was possible.
I'm going to guess that wasn't covered in your 1940s Hollywood class back at Hamilton.
No.
That was not a scenario. Like it was a reality back then.
No. And I feel really lucky to be working at a time when I think that mothers and working mothers and we're at the forefront of making changes and making sure that women feel supported in every office space, hopefully. And so I feel really blessed because, I heard horror stories about people, you would leave the room and, people would be talking about you behind your back, or they wouldn't care that you were on maternity leave. It's really archaic, a lot of the way that Hollywood is run. And so to have all this just institutional support is.
Yeah. That was going to be a question I had for you was what, as a woman, what has it been like? And have there been challenges like what you're talking about? But it sounds like, at least for you, I imagine a lot of it is just what writing room you end up in and who the showrunner is and who your boss is. It really
is. And so, I mean, Nancy was the only job I got. So it wasn't like I had a lot of jobs to choose from last season, but I felt really lucky in the way that Hamilton was, one of the only schools I got into, but I was like, oh, this is my place. It doesn't matter that I didn't get into those other schools. Hollywood's in an interesting space right now, I think, with Me Too and just with bad behavior and just a lot of things that people took for granted as the way that the world has to work. And, you don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to keep people in the office 15, 16 hours a day. We don't have to sleep at our desks to make good work.
Right.
You can have a work-life balance. You can ask for time off. You can say that you have to go to a doctor's appointment and go to a doctor's appointment. I don't know. I'd like to think that a lot of that is from having more women in leadership roles, but I don't want to discount the fact that men are fathers and taking on all those responsibilities too, and having an equal seat at the table.
Thank you, Céline. I appreciate that.
Because I've worked for a lot of fathers who want to be home with their kids too. You know? They want to leave at 6. They don't want to be here all night. So maybe it's a generational thing too. Of, the way that it used to be, it's like pledging, right? It's like, I went through this, so you have to go through it. And it's like,
Right. Right. Well, I remember early on in my career, I can't tell you how many nights I would sit at my desk for at least an hour, if not two, because I didn't have any more work to do, but I couldn't be seen leaving early, or I couldn't be seen, I couldn't be seen leaving on time. I had to look like I was staying late. And I just feel like, and that has led me to, try to manage my teams, which is we're all adults. And I think no matter what industry you are, if you have work to do, you need to get the work done. And if there's a deadline on that work, you need to get it done by that deadline. And if you can get that done and leave, after an hour, more power to you. If you're a happy employee, I'm going to be happy to have you, and I just think that's just the attitude that more people just need to adopt.
And I think weirdly, the silver lining of the pandemic is that
we're all proven we can do that
from home. We can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
We can do it. You don't have to be a slave to the office to produce good work.
And how's that go? So that's true, I imagine, for a writer, but not necessarily true for a lot of your job or associated with your job in production. How's that going with all this?
It's good. I mean, my bosses literally had like a 300-page document that they submitted of just every protocol, every safety, every guideline, every way that they were going to make everybody safe and secure on set. And the studios are being really, really serious about it and really safe. And there was a moment, because we shoot in Vancouver, and a bunch of shows in Vancouver started up at the same time. And
Canada's not screwing around. Canada's even
worse. Canada is like quarantine, like it is strict, which is great. I think Vancouver has done really, really well, and because they're strict. And there was a time when Vancouver was overwhelmed with getting back all of the testing that needed to be done across all the shows for all the people to be able to test again, or to be able to be on set and get a negative test. And so there was like a weird rocky period where we thought we could shoot, but we couldn't shoot. But since then, there was only one day that we had to stop. We had to shut down, and it was not because anybody was sick. It was just because they had a test that hadn't come back negative, and they weren't allowed on set. And so, everybody feels really safe, and I'm looking at these dailies from my episode now, and everybody's just really happy to be back at work. And I do feel really, really lucky that I work in an industry that is resilient in this way. And, fortunately has the money to
right.
It really, like, all of this just really highlights how messed up our whole system is.
Sure.
The Hollywood machine makes you money, so you throw money at it to get it back going, and schools don't make you money, and who cares about schools?
I know. So looking back, anything you wish you had known when you were arriving from Yonkers on campus at Hamilton?
I left Hamilton feeling like I had left it all on the field. I did everything. I wrote for the Spec for 4 years. I was a DJ. I was a WHCL DJ for 4 years.
Welcome back to WHCL.
I know. Pumping the wattage into your cottage.
There you go.
I was on the editorial staff of the Red Weather, the literary magazine. I co-founded a sorority my sophomore year. I was on the interfraternity. I was a philanthropy chair of the interfraternity council. I felt like I had done so much, and I had a really, really great experience. But looking back, I feel like there was so much more I could have done. And I feel like listening to these episodes, a lot of people have this same kind of, I don't want to say it's a regret, but there's just more people I wish I had known that were different from where I was from. Just different stories, different experiences. I wish I made more of an effort to get outside of my bubble.
It's a big reason why I'm doing it. Yeah. And
I do think that, part of it is it's stressful to be on campus, and it's stressful to manage all of these expectations. And, class-wise, I was, on an academic scholarship. So I felt pressure to have good grades. And I wish I had taken an econ class or something, but I didn't want to take a math class because that wasn't my strong suit. And why would I take a math class that was going to be hard when I could go take rocks for jocks that all the guys, the football players on the hall for me said that was a really easy way to get out of your math and science requirement. And so, I'm in Professor Ted Eismeyer, and I think Bob Piquette maybe, and a couple other professors have a Facebook group online where it's about civic discussions and politics and stuff like that. And I wish that I took one government class, but like, especially now, I wish I take more government classes. Like to get out of the English major had a language requirement, and I was not great at foreign language. And so to get out of the last piece of the requirement, I took a history of language class. It was an anthropology class, and I loved it. And I had never thought about taking an anthropology class. And I took another one. It was with Bonnie Arcioli, and she was so great. And you know, stuff like that. Like I got to take a couple flyers. Like I took Mark Cryer's intro to acting workshop, which was so fun. And I just wish that I had more opportunity, or I had pushed myself a little bit harder to take those things that felt like crazy classes. Why would I take this?
Yeah.
You know, why should I know that person? I have all my friends, you know,
right.
Because you're given this space in time that has everything, literally everything. People from all around the world, classes across all disciplines. And I think you get comfortable in where you are, but also you're 18, 19, 20. Like,
right. And it's hard to separate yourself from the stupid social pressures that exist when you're that age and a campus like that, and, you know, worrying about friends and what people think of you and all that sort of stuff, and just throwing yourself into, you know, all the things that are available to you there. You're right. It is a common thing that comes up, and, you know, maybe there's a hint of regret in it, but I think it's also just a realization of, wow, there really was more there than I even realized, you know, or allowed myself to realize.
Yeah.
So wait, I just want to go back to something you said. You started a sorority? I
did. I co-founded
at a time when the school was trying to get rid of fraternities and sororities. You're starting one. Good for you.
Yes, Kappa Sigma Alpha. It still exists.
All right, your legacy.
It is a legacy. It's funny. I didn't want to do Greek life. I wasn't that interested, and especially my freshman year roommate pledged a sorority, and people were just knocking on our door at all hours of the night, and I didn't see her for weekends on end, and she never slept, and I was like, that sounds awful. Mm-hmm. But I did see, and I dated a guy in a fraternity, and I did understand the value of the friendships without all of the hazing and everything. And so a friend of mine and we were in Burke Library, and it was like Greek hour where like all the pledges all had to do, you know, study sessions together. And I guess there was like mandatory study sessions or something. And we were kind of like, wouldn't it be fun to have that social environment without the hazing? And we just started talking about it. And then we asked Lisa Magnorelli how to do, because the sororities at Hamilton were founded on campus. They weren't national.
Right.
So anyone could do it. And so we just figured it out. And then we got in. I mean, it was hard. It was hard work to do it and to get recognized and to get pledges and to convince people that, you know, you're doing something worthy of their time. But, you know, we were the nerds who told you that we weren't going to haze you. And we just wanted to like hang out and watch movies and have a supportive group of girlfriends. And we weren't cool, but we didn't care, and it was what it was. And so, but yeah, it still exists. And I think it's fall pledging now. They shifted it, but every time there's a new pledge class, I get a little message on Facebook with all the girls' names and pictures, and it's nice. It's nice to know.
Do they have to pay tribute to the founder? I mean, you know, is your picture hanging somewhere? I mean, this is incredible.
There is part of pledging. There's I don't want to talk about pledging because it's, you know, trade secrets, but being a founder has worked its way into, people have to know your name.
All right, there you go.
But yeah, it's still there. Kappa Sigma Alpha.
Well, look, I mean, creating something at that school and then having it live on after you leave, there's got to be immense pride in that.
There is, and again, it's like it takes a special place, like a place like Hamilton, to have the confidence, to instill in you the confidence to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was talking about this recently with somebody about like, is college worth it? Like what's the cost of college? Because I don't know, I was doing a 529 or 529 for my daughter, and my financial advisor is like gaming out if she went to Hamilton in 18 or 19 years, what I mean, Hamilton would cost $750,000. You're just
Yeah,
like, okay.
the advice I got, the financial advice I got from somebody on 529s was just put money in and just know whatever it is, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah. You're like, okay, college is not worth $750,000. It was not that much when I went there, but especially in an industry like our industry where it's, on the ground running, just be in production, figure it out. You can't really be like taught anything. Like, what is the value of a liberal arts education? And I think it's confidence. It's just breadth of exposure and giving students the world and letting them play and letting them. Yeah. So when I moved to LA, I was scared, but I looked back at my time at Hamilton and I kind of cobbled it all together. And I was like, I came to that campus knowing nobody, knowing nothing. And I studied abroad and I co-founded a sorority and I learned how to be a DJ and I, wrote for the paper and I did all these things. And the school allowed me to stretch my arms into all these things. So I was like, yeah, move across country, go to LA, try to be a TV writer. Sure, why not?
All right, that's Céline Geiger, class of 2004. Clearly a lot of love for Hamilton. And clearly Hamilton played a role in getting her to where she is today. I always enjoy getting the behind-the-scenes look at how some of this stuff gets made. And it's refreshing to hear a lot of the positivity in her stories. It's encouraging. And I loved hearing her daughter in the background. I was on a fairly important work Zoom this week, and my son was hanging out in my office and saw himself on the camera and started to perform on that camera, and then proceeded to lie on a couch in view of the camera and flail his feet around on the camera, and everyone got a good kick out of it. So I think we've reached the point in the pandemic where there should be no embarrassment for kid interruption on things like Zoom meetings and podcasts and so forth. It's just personal life and all these other things are just melding into one. We got to be all right with it. My thanks to Céline for joining. It was really enjoyable. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on this show. And this week we end with music from another Hamilton musician. In the Hamilton community, he's known as Drew MacArthur, class of 2019. In the music world, he's known as Brew. You can check him out at listentobrew.link. Again, listentobrew, BREW.link. Today we're going to feature his latest, called Cry to Me, featuring Tyler Johnson. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
It's fresh brew. Lie to me, cry to me, surprising me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me, cry to me, confide in me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to see. Lie to me, cry to me, surprising me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me, cry to me, confide in me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to see. You can cry to me, let me help you find your peace. You can ride with me, it's worth all the love so we can feel high. I'm only up for the moment, we be flirting and flowing. It's 4 a.m. when she calls, she know I'm up till the morning. But call her after she over, in 5 minutes we gone. Just put your head on my shoulder, hold your heart while you're crying. Just put your face next to mine. You can lie to me, cry to me, surprising me, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me, cry to me, confide in me, that's just how I'm trying to see. Lie to me, cry to me, surprising me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me, cry to me, confide in me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to see. You can hit me on your Sunday, I know how them clouds can feel. I could teach you how to love right, you gon' have to save me from you. Yeah, tell me what you want to do, hit me and I'll come through. I ain't seen you in a minute, feel like I still know you. Yeah, tell me what you need, I can help you breathe. Maybe if you cry to me, just just know that I'ma fight for you. If you confide in me, I'll make sure they're kind to you. I'll still ride for you. I'm gonna keep on trying for you. Always think what might be. Whenever you out of sight to me, I just wanna write for you. Hope you're making art for me. Maybe I should call. I just wanna fall for you. I just wanna fall for you. I just wanna fall for you. Yeah, baby, you're the one. Yeah, I just wanna fall for you. Can lie to me. Lie to me. Cry to me. You can cry to me. Surprising me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me. Cry to me. Confide in me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to see. Lie to me. Cry to me. Surprising me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to be. Lie to me. Cry to me. Confide in me, yeah, that's just how I'm trying to see. You can cry to me. You can cry to me.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.